Hello, everyone. I guess we're live. Hi. Well, this is Ohi. I'm a community manager here at Funded Next. And yeah, Jared is getting prepared and he'll be joining in a few minutes. Yeah, I think we can start now. Are you ready to join, Jared?
Of course.
All right. I'll I'll turn your camera into the front one.
All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. Very happy to be here today. This is a great opportunity for you all to learn a bit more about the mental game of trading. For those that don't know me, my name is Jared Tendler. I'm the author of The Mental Game of Trading. I've been coaching for over 20 years. I've been coaching traders for over a decade. And I've got a lot of experience working with retail traders like yourselves. Those are kind of working through the prop firm challenges. Also had a lot of experience working with fund managers and institutional traders. So I've kind of run the gamut when it comes to trading psychology and the people that I've worked with to be able to, help them figure out how to level up their trading. Sometimes this side of the game can be a little bit hard to grasp. Many people view trading psychology as being, the whole thing, and it's not. Okay. You have to have an edge. You got to have sound technical expertise, but you need a psychology. You need a mental game that's capable of realizing that edge. And so that's what we're here to do today. So I'm excited for this opportunity. I'm excited for a chance to kind of work with all you all. And yes, golf was the place where I kind of got my start. Going way back now, 25 plus years. We just had the U.S. Open this past weekend. I tried to qualify for the U.S. Open, choked, missed the playoff by a shot, and that kind of launched me into this field as I tried to figure out answers to questions. I figured out my own answers. I've gotten trained as a therapist. Having gone through an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and 2 years getting licensed. But I've never actually practiced as a therapist. My goal was to always bring the kind of best of sports psychology and merge it with therapy to find more potent answers. And early in my career, I was doing that with golfers. Then I met a poker player, wrote 2 poker books, and then traders started picking up the poker books, realizing how much the two things were much aligned. So again, I've had a lot of experience, worked with lots of traders from around the world. And so today I'm going to be answering your questions. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the challenges that you all face with regards to the negative emotions, namely greed, fear, FOMO, or tilt. Tilt is another word for anger, right? Anger, is problematic for a lot of reasons, including revenge trading. And we're also going to talk about lacking confidence and overconfidence. Again, you wouldn't necessarily frame overconfidence as being a negative emotion, but it is because it costs you, and that's the whole point here. So I'm going to kind of open up with a couple basic fundamentals, and then I want to hear from you. I want to know what problems you're facing, what questions you have, what topics you'd like to explore more, and we're going to spend the remainder of our time. And I'm going to be answering specifically your questions, talking about the problems that are most near to you, because there's a lot that we can do. But what matters most to me is being very precise about helping you with the problems that you're dealing with. So I might ask you some follow-up questions. I mean, it might be a little bit harder to kind of follow with this many people in the chat, but I'm down for it. Like I said, sometimes sometimes the biggest problem actually is your perspective on your problems, right? And I'm going to say that again. Sometimes the biggest problem that you have is your perspective, right? And so many of you are battling these negative emotions the wrong way. And that's in part because you have faulty ideas about emotion. So let's just talk briefly about emotion for a second, okay? Now, imagine you're walking down the street and you feel pain in your foot. I mean, you're going to be curious to understand why you're feeling that pain. And it could be a variety of reasons, namely, like you twisted your ankle, you stepped on a rock, there's some rock in your shoe, or something else happened, right? But the point is, you would never look at the pain as the problem. Pain is a signal of the problem. And emotions are effectively that. So when we look at the greed, the FOMO, the revenge trading, the overconfidence, the lack of confidence, emotions that negatively affect your ability to execute, they're not the problem, right? And as I said, your perspective on this really matters. Those emotions are not the problem. The problems are what's producing those emotions, and they include underlying flaws, biases, wishes, illusions. You just want to buy a Lambo? Well, you better be damn lucky, number one. And once you earn enough to buy that Lambo, you better stop trading, because you'll have zero skill that's going to be able to, let you ride farther, right? To become a skilled trader requires being able to tease out the underlying flaws that ultimately really affect your decision making and create a lot of extra emotion. One more key principle, and this is something that I think is worthwhile to kind of effectively burn into your brain. We can get the screen share up here now. This graphic is really, really key. Okay, it's called the Datson Law. I did not invent this. It's been around for over 100 years. Okay, don't overthink the arousal stress thing. The idea is energy, emotion, stress, intensity. Okay, they're all sort of synonymous terms with regards to performance. Okay, when your energy is too low, okay, as is followed on the left side of this curve, right? You can see performance is, low, arousal, stress, energy, emotion is too low. You're not going to be very skilled, right? Your performance is low because you don't have enough energy to power the mind, right? These are the classic discipline problems. Okay, you're looking for intensity. Many of you come to the market like looking for that dopamine hit, looking for that excitement. And what happens, right? You end up making mistakes that you know better than. You jump in prematurely. You move targets, kind of hoping there's going to be more, but really all you're doing is trying to generate a lot of intensity to get yourself up to the top of that curve. On the flip side, when your emotions rise too high, right? All the negative emotions we're going to primarily talk about today exist on the right side of that curve, where we get to level 60, 70, 80. There's a lot of negative emotion that's present that is then kind of pulling your performance down, because negative emotion, right, or excessive emotion starts to shut down your ability to think, to plan, to make decisions. Those processes are critical, right? You think about like a trade has to have some kind of foresight, some planning, some decision making associated with it. And if you lose the ability to do that, even in the middle of a trade, you're compromised. So there's one other key principle. Intense emotion shuts off the part of the brain responsible for controlling emotion. Okay, I'm going to say that again because it is that critical. Negative emotion, intense emotion, shuts off the part of the brain that actually allows you to be able to control it. So you get caught in the cycle where you're trying to correct your revenge trading. You're trying to correct your FOMO. You're trying to correct this intense fear in the moments where that intensity is so high, you actually can't kind of work against it. You get down to level 80, 90 to 100. Your ability to control your emotions is so significantly compromised that you're not going to be able to do it. And that's unfortunately what a lot of traders end up succumbing to, right? And I think it's basically a version of gambling with your mentality, gambling with your trading. When you set yourself up to not be ready to attack those emotions in real time, especially early when you still have your key mentality. So I see a bunch of questions kind of flying in here. I'm going to get to those shortly, but I am specifically curious. Do any of you have any questions on what I just discussed? Because as I said, if your perspective on your mentality, on your emotions, on your brain's ability to be able to counteract those emotions, if you don't have the right perspective, you don't have the right knowledge here, then you're basically setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up to gamble, and that's not what we're here for, right? There's nothing about your trading that should mirror gambling, right? And to me, gambling is basically betting on a negative edge, right? If you don't have an edge, period, right, then you can be in an exploratory state. You can be learning and trying to develop and grow. Totally get that, right? Absolutely applaud it, right? But if you believe you have an edge, and in certain situations your emotions are so high that your edge disappears, then at that point you're gambling, not just with your account, but also with your mentality. So let's see the first question here. Hi, Jared. Even after I win on my first trade itself, I keep trading when I see my edge. I know I should stop, but I can't. What should I do with my mindset to stop trading after I win, even after I see my edge? All right. So we're now kind of getting into the specific questions, but I do think, so I'm going to kind of pause on this question here, mark a minute. I will come back to you, I promise. Benoit, I see this question here. How to become aware of that point where emotions are too intense? Fantastic question. And actually, I'm going to jump into the next thing I was going to talk about right now. Let me share my screen here again. Let's get this out of here. Ooh. Data question worksheet. If we can get that screen share up here again. If you want to be able to recognize, right? And see, I see another question from Nadir. What's the best way to recognize when greed is influencing my trading decisions? Right? Fantastic question. This is what you want to do. Okay. Now, it's not a very complicated worksheet. If you want to download a copy for yourself, you can go to jaredtendler.com/worksheets. Okay. But the point is, all you have to do is just open up a blank sheet of paper and start capturing data on each of these individual points. Okay. So situationally, when you believe that greed has started to creep up, when you start making decisions that are influenced by FOMO, or maybe there's some overconfidence present, maybe there's some fear, right? Kind of paralyzing you to be able to get into an entry that you know is viable. Okay. So for those of you that want to start to get really precise here, in those moments, try to identify the trigger, like what's sparking that emotion, right? I see other people making money, or I've actually done quite well. Maybe I'm getting close to a payout, and now all of a sudden that fear is ramped up. Specifically, what thoughts are going through your head at that moment? Okay. If you're going to create recognition of these patterns in real time, we got to get really detailed. And this isn't complicated. It just requires doing a little bit of work that you might not normally have been, knew that you needed to do in the first place. But, look, you can't create, a trading strategy like that. You can't build bigger muscles by reading a book on fitness or watching a fitness video. So your mentality, your mental game cannot get stronger until you are able to have some more specific detail here around these topics. So, right, we're dealing with the thoughts, specifically what emotion are you feeling, what behaviors or actions. In other words, like sometimes traders will kind of peer into like one monitor, one screen. Maybe you change to different time frames. Maybe there's kind of like a nervous tapping with your leg, or there's like tension in your hand, heat in your head, or maybe tension in your chest. We're looking for all of the signals, right, that are kind of accompanying this increase in emotion. Okay, that's really the big thing that we're trying to do here. And that's the data collection worksheet. So as you do this day over day, it's almost like grabbing puzzle pieces. Okay, you get puzzle pieces that help to inform an overall pattern, right? You think about what you've been able to do successfully as traders. You are looking for patterns in the market to see opportunity. So take that same skill and turn it on yourself. That's what the data collection worksheet is trying to do, is to help you to better recognize the patterning, okay, that exists within your own mentality, right? They happen in repetitive patterns again and again and again. You're just not unique, right? When revenge trading hits, when FOMO strikes, situationally it might be a little bit different, but the things that you're struggling with in those moments are very, very common, consistent patterns. So it's just your job to begin to get better clarity on what those patterns are. All right. If there's any other questions, we can get to them. Otherwise, let's on these topics. Otherwise, I'll kind of dive in and get to your questions. And if you can get that other question that was up here before. Here we go. Thank you, Market Minute. Here we go. All right. So let me read this again. Even after I win on my first trade itself, I keep trading when I see my edge. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and I want you to ask yourself the question, like, why is that a problem? you got to keep that thing up there longer. There we go. I know I should stop. Why should you stop? Why should winning one trade cause you to stop? If it's sparking overconfidence, if it's sparking fear, well, then we've got to deal with those problems first and foremost. But I don't know why, just from the clarity in your question, why you should stop after your first trade, right? I think that's like a mythology. Look, our job is not to control your emotions long term. What you're describing right here is stopping trading after one trade. Is you attempting to control and minimize your emotions? But this is not a long term strategy. I mean, if you see your edge playing out, well, we're talking about volume here, right? You need enough to really kind of make this endeavor in trading worthwhile. You need enough trades to do that. And I don't see why, based on your question, that you shouldn't, unless there's so much emotion that gets sparked, right? That first win creates overconfidence, creates fear. If you trade on, let's say you take that next trade and it fails, and now you're not break even on the day, ideally, right? One win, one loss should not cause you to be break even. That was next loss maybe triggers anger, like, damn it, I knew it, I should have not taken that second trade, I knew it was going to fail. It's like, no, that's actually a different version of overconfidence. You do not know what's going to happen next, but if you get pissed off at yourself for taking a trade that is a system trade and it fails, I mean, then you're basically overconfident. Okay. All right. What's our next question here? I know there's a lot coming in here. I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. How to deactivate the part of the brain which is responsible for triggering intense emotion? You can't. Okay. The only thing you can do here, right? We'll go back to this, the graphic, right? That Yerkes Datson Law. The only thing you can do is capture the early warning signs before that emotion becomes too intense. I guess I'll throw this up here because it's a worthwhile, kind of next bit of strategy. It might be a little bit deep, right? Again, I'm kind of throwing a lot at you all kind of quickly here. So for those of you that maybe this is a little bit next level, don't worry about it. Okay. But after you're doing that data collection worksheet, okay, if we can get the screen share up here again. After you do that data collection worksheet for a little bit of time, okay, you're going to then do this, right? So this is a fear profile, okay, but all of them, every emotion can be kind of mapped in exactly the same way. Okay, we're really going to kind of focus specifically on these 10 levels. So what you're trying to do here is define and detail the differences between like the earliest warning signs of fear, like the earliest indications of fear. And maybe it's just this kind of heightened nervousness in your body, right? It's not even necessarily something that, there's no thoughts. You're not even close to making any mistakes. It's just like the nervous anticipation of like, oh, maybe there's going to be an opportunity coming. Okay. And then, level 3, like, oh no, now there's a real clear area of interest here. And the stress is kind of rising. I get worried, what if I take it, it's going to fail. Again, now there's some thoughts and things are accelerating. Again, data collection worksheet helps you to kind of figure out what those details are. Okay. And so as you're doing this, you're kind of finding the point where your mind is really going to shut off and your emotions are going to start to rule. Okay. So back to your question, how do you deactivate the part of the brain? You can't deactivate it. It is a fundamental law of human nature. Some people think of it as the fight or flight mechanism. You cannot control this. The only thing you can do is get ahead of it so you can use your mind the right way to prevent those emotions from getting so intense that they force your hand and cause significant mistakes. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, this is a revenge trading profile, but this is just an example of what you can eventually kind of get to. Okay, so here, right, frustrated that after 5 minutes of entry have not been able to scale out risk. Irritated if price hits my target, but I'm not filled. Okay, irate now, right? If it then comes all the way back and hits my stop for a full loss. Okay, and so what happens is, at this point now at level 3, there's significant revenge trading. Okay, you get to level 5 to 10 here. Basically, this trader, this is an example where emotions escalate and then just fall off a cliff, right? In terms of that performance stress curve, where they become so intense, so fast that you cannot control yourself anymore, and you are blowing accounts at that point. Okay, so the whole point is that you have to be able to stop yourself, right, at levels 1 and 2, because you see the danger, right? If you get to level 3, like, all right, well, at that point, you're kind of gambling. Maybe I'll get lucky and the trade wins, and then, okay, I can kind of relax. But if it loses, and probabilistically that's a pretty high chance, well, then now I'm at great risk of blowing these accounts. So yes, in the short term, you have to be able to recognize these warning signs, catch them early, and then at that point, you have an opportunity to correct the emotion if you understand what's causing it. You have an opportunity to walk away, take a break, reduce it a little bit, come back with a little bit more conviction and strength to trade properly. But that's the only way that you can, really kind of establish a good game plan here. You cannot allow yourself to get too far down that curve, because otherwise the risk is just too high. Okay. So yeah, you can't deactivate the emotion. That's just a part of it. Do professional traders feel bad when a position loses? Yes, they do. Many professional traders who are, 8 to 9 figure traders a year, when they have trades fail, it does not feel good. But they are also able to take that punch. Think about like a boxer, right? The market is just beating you up, and you got to sometimes stand there and take it and just kind of protect yourself as best you can, manage that risk as best you can, just kind of dodging, minimizing the damage as best you can. Bell rings, take a break. And then eventually there's going to come a time where you're going to be able to swing back. And that's what the best traders in the world are able to do. I mean, they're the ones doing a lot of the punching, but they will get hit. But they're not going to take any knockout blows, right? And that's what, so many of you end up doing. And I will say that one of the biggest examples where losing becomes problematic for many of you is where you get that kind of either funded account or that challenge account down to a level that's so low that it kind of encourages you to say, F it, let's gamble. Like, what's the downside, right? You've already experienced so much pain. So, all right, let's just toss in kind of a Hail Mary here and see what happens. Maybe I'll get lucky. If not, then I'll just, refund the account. But what does that do? It actually makes you better at being undisciplined, better at succumbing to the pain of those losses. So you want to become better at being able to take the punches, right? To kind of stand there and be able to build it back the right way, right? If you just kind of toss in these big trades trying to get lucky, well, then guess what? At some point in the future, even if you get funded, even if you make payouts, you are going to take gambles like that when you're under duress and you're struggling. So the best traders in the world, right? They feel pain. They're not immune to it, okay? Especially when their 10% drawdown is 10 mil. I mean, it's a big chunk of change, right? And it can feel like, you just lost a McLaren. But what they do next is what defines their difference. All right. What do we have next question-wise here, Ohi? How do I separate my self-worth from my trading results? If you are here to try to build confidence as a human being, that means that you got a lot on the line here, right? You're no longer sort of trading P&L. You're now trading your own self-worth. So what I would do is I would spend some time defining who you are as a human being, separate from trading. Okay. If trading were to fail, right, you just kind of get to a point where you're like, it's not worth my time anymore. Not worth my risk. Who were you at that point? And who were you before you started trading, right? To create that differentiation sometimes means actually defining the elements, the characteristics, the values that we have as individuals separate from our trading results. And the cool thing is that it kind of de-risks this whole enterprise a little bit, because if you're here trying to become a more confident person, that's just a lot on the line. It's going to intensify your emotions, right? Every feeling that you have is going to be intensified, whether it be losing, whether it be taking the steps back, whether it be gaining a lot of confidence and being at risk of overconfidence. So the separation is really critical. And the best way to do that is just to do a bunch of writing that clearly defines who you are separate from trading. All right, Raj, I see your appreciation. Thank you. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. And we got a lot of other questions here. So what's next? How do I go into the market with zero expectations? Define very clearly what your faulty expectations are. And then counteract each one of them. I mean, again, I think there's a piece of your question here that goes back to my first points here about the biggest problems that many of you have is the faulty perspective that you're bringing. And I think in your question, you think that you can just walk into the market with zero expectations tomorrow. Okay. Okay. So let's just say you've had knee pain for, 5 years. Okay. And you finally decide to get surgery, get a knee replacement, whatever it is, you're finally going to take care of it. Pain's gone, but you've been limping for 5 years. You think tomorrow you're going to be able to walk normally? No, that's not how training, not trading, training. That's not how the rehabilitation process goes. So the implication here, and this is true for many of your questions, right? Many of you believe that you can instantaneously change your mentality, change how you function in the markets from a mental and emotional standpoint. Okay. And it's not complicated. It just requires more repetition. Okay. So if you're going to train yourself to go into the market with zero expectations, you got to firmly define all of the expectations that you're bringing, because they are the default. That's what you are expecting right now. You are expected to expect to make money every day, expected to perform perfectly, expected to, have positions go in your favor, expect to have your bias play out. Whatever expectations you're already bringing in, that is what your expectation is, because that's the default. If you're going to do something different, right, it's going to take some time, right, to acknowledge what those are, understand what the corrections are. Okay. So the zero expectations has the ethic of, I don't know what is going to happen in the market today. I have ideas, I have theses, I have biases, and I have managed my risk properly so that I can capitalize on as much of those opportunities as possible over a chunk of time. You're not paid like you're a psychic. You're paid based on your probabilistic abilities and the ability to manage that risk. So that's what you can expect, right? To expect to go in with that kind of a more process-oriented, execution-oriented approach, whereas I think a lot of the expectations end up being around money, and that's problematic for a lot of reasons. All right, Joseph, how do you monitor your mindset when you're in a hot run? Most cases, this results to overconfidence and tilting from following your rules. I'm assuming you meant not following your rules. I would really appreciate your thoughts on this. So I mentioned that data collection worksheet before. Again, what's going to kind of trigger you to, use that thing? I mean, like for some people, it's when they're struggling, when they're experiencing more fear. for you, if you're doing well and you know that this pattern exists and has existed again and again, right? Your job is to kind of recognize that small deviation, where the overconfidence starts to creep up. Now, I'm assuming that tilt comes in because the overconfidence has made you move profit targets, size larger than you should, maybe taken a bigger payout than you should, and now the account's at greater risk because your position sizing hasn't changed, right? Whatever kind of is happening then. Well, then when those mistakes are punished, then the tilt comes in and just rapidly increases the problem and makes it a much bigger deal. So what you're describing actually is a very, very common cause of the kind of boom and bust cycles that many of you go through. Doing well, get overconfident, make mistakes, kind of think you can do no wrong. Maybe you get lucky for a little bit. Maybe those mistakes aren't punished. Makes it even worse because now the sizing and the problems get bigger, but your heads are kind of in the clouds. Like you don't even realize, like you've been walking up a mountain and now your head is kind of in the clouds and you don't even realize that there's no more mountain beneath you. You're just kind of floating. And as soon as it gets called out, which is generally going to happen with some losses, bam, cloud's gone and you come crashing down. Right. So that's a big kind of part of the cycle here. So use that data collection worksheet when you're doing well. Gather up all the little signals, right, that your mind is beginning to, or that the overconfidence is beginning to creep up and your mind is beginning to get compromised. And that's how you can take action against it and keep yourself grounded and consistent around what you know is true. Because overconfidence can be summarized down to believing a lie, right? As simple as I know what's going to happen next. I believe that this trade is going to win, or I know this trade is going to win, and you don't, right? None of you are psychic. If you were, you wouldn't be here. Let's just say that much. Session's amazing so far. Thank you. Had a question. Glad you're enjoying it so far. After 20 years in the industry, do you see common patterns in how long it takes beginner traders to develop mental control? Good question. Actually, I will say this is a question that I have not gotten before. I've gotten a lot of questions in my career. I appreciate the uniqueness. I actually thought, because a lot of times this question is like, how long do you think it takes for beginning traders to be like skilled traders? But to develop mental control, I think is a function of a number of factors. So it's not kind of a hard and fast rule. So, age sometimes is advantageous, right? So I will say that if you're older and you have more experience having mental control in other areas of your life, well, that's to your advantage. If you're a guy in the 18 to 25-year-old range, well, guess what? Your brain is not fully formed. Okay. Now, I did not know that when I was in my 20s, but it does explain a lot. Okay. So the frontal lobe, right? Part of the brain responsible for controlling emotion does not fully form for a guy until you're 26, 27. For women, it tends to be around 23, 24. So, all genders, right, having an issue in those kind of early 20s. But so if you're older, right, you have established that cortical functioning. You've likely established, discipline control elsewhere in your life. And so you can bring it here in trading, provided, right, that the intense emotions are not so intense that they're overriding it. And sometimes trading does bring out intense emotions that does not occur elsewhere in your life. And this is sometimes surprising to people who may not be greedy in life, may not be overconfident, in life, may not be that angry in life. And yet here you are in trading, having all of this emotional chaos. And you're like, who is this person? I don't even recognize this. It's so the point is, like, there's not a hard and fast rule here in how long it takes. But I would say that if you are older, good experience controlling emotions elsewhere, are disciplined in your work ethic, because again, developing mental control, it's a skill. It's a skill like anything else. It's not something you can gain today, just like you can't get bigger muscles from reading a book on physical fitness. I've said it before, right? There's not instantaneous change. These things are not so overwhelmingly hard that it's impossible. It just takes the right approach, right? So, time frame is tough to say, but I think if you're diligent, in the 6 to 12 week range, you can, make some significant progress here if you're diligent. If you're not, that's obviously going to take you longer. So long-winded answer there for you. All right, Usama, what mindset shift helped you the most when transitioning from reaching to challenges with fear or frustration to responding with clarity and confidence as a leader? Again, I think the question around mindset shift, to me, it kind of implies that magical style thinking of how quickly things can happen. For me, it was not singular moments that like solved all of it. I think one of the biggest ones for me with fear, though, that was that moment that did like really kind of plant a seed that made a big difference going forward, was realizing that the feeling, the experience of fear was not a problem. My body could be just, massive butterflies in your stomach, having trouble breathing, dry throat, tension in my hands. It felt like I was sweating profusely. That none of it mattered. It was my body's normal response to the situation, and it wasn't consequential, right? I trusted my training, I trusted my process, and then, you still retain that skill, right? The emotional system doesn't shut off your ability to perform. It just diminishes your ability to create, be innovative, spontaneous in the moment, unless you've learned to harness it. And I'd say for a lot of traders, for a lot of professionals, right, when they are reaching their peak performance, right, they're in the zone, it's oftentimes a function of being able to harness those emotions, whether it be fear or frustration, and powering their ability to see things that they can't normally see. I would say that generally speaking, that was not the case for me. Like I needed to be a bit kind of in a calmer place to do that. But for some, that is the catalyst. But I think especially with regards to frustration, so many of us want to react to the feeling. You take a loss, make a mistake, and you immediately want to correct it. But you just sit with it for a moment. Again, it's not going to kill you. It's not that consequential. It's hard. There's plenty of advice out there on meditation and deep breathing and things like that, and all that is viable. But the point is, like, can you just hold yourself in the emotion? Because it will start to dissipate, and it doesn't have to affect you. But so often we just want to react and get rid of that feeling quickly, including the feeling of fear. Of course, what ends up happening is we end up generating a whole set of issues afterwards if you do react to it, because you do things that you know that you shouldn't. Okay. I'm not going to try to pronounce your name. I apologize for that. How does one control his emotions and fear? So the control thing, again, is a little bit of a misnomer. We're looking strategically to only control emotion in the short term. But ideally, you want to be correcting it simultaneously, right? Actually correcting the cause. Because if you are only controlling your emotion, you can create a dangerous scenario where it's almost like a pressure cooker, right? You're controlling. Again, mental process, applying that control. And then once it gets overwhelming, it can just create this huge snapback. And so what I have seen with many traders is dealing with the frustration. They know, okay, take a loss. Like, all right, I'm gonna take a small break, keep myself together, and just, it's okay, right? Losses are part of the game. There's luck here. I can't control everything. But then, you still reach a breaking point where that emotion kind of builds in a subtle way and just rapidly overwhelms you, and some significant destruction occurs. Another example of this is the emotion that carries over day to day. So you had a bad day, emotion gets produced, still kind of pissed off. You wake up the next morning and, in your head, you're trying to say like, oh, okay, today's a new day, fresh start, clean slate. Except you're not really starting fresh, right? If this was a glass of water, you've got some emotion there, right? It's not full, right? You still feel decently good, but it means that less emotion needs to be triggered in order for you to get overwhelmed. And so that happens day over day. And this is certainly more common, kind of when you're actually in a drawdown, day over day struggling, just kind of maybe losing a few accounts. And, again, the emotion's kind of building even as you retain that optimism. But then one day it just all kind of snaps and you're kind of left with a trail of destruction. So that's the risk of only approaching this from a control-based standpoint. Okay. And again, I think it implies that the emotion is the problem. Emotion is not the problem. Emotion is causing problems, but the real problem is the underlying flaw, bias, wish, illusion, hope that you are bringing into the market that is producing, right, those emotions. So what you want to do is figure out what those are. Okay? And I talk about this a lot in the book, right? The Mental Game of Trading. Using a process to dissect and get at the roots, get at the underlying flaws of those emotions. And when you do that, you have the ability to create a correction. I call it injecting logic. Those of you who are familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, it's just a technique kind of born from that, except the difference is that you are training in advance what these logic statements are so that they're strong in your mind. Because again, if you want to have some strength to fight against that rising tide of emotion, you can't just show up unprepared, right? You've got to have a little bit of preparation to sharpen your mind for those moments. So you write down those logic statements, you study them, and then in the moment where it comes, the faster you catch it, the earlier you catch it, you apply that logic and give yourself the opportunity to make some progress. It's hard, but it's no different than like being in the gym trying to, do a bench press and like really pushing. The harder it is, the more value there is, right? Because that's where the muscle, that's where the strength gets built. If you're bench pressing 20 pounds, like, right, well, this is, you're not gaining anything, right? I'm not saying that you have to max out and get to the point of failure to build muscle. There's lots of ways to build muscle. So my point is, like, I don't necessarily want you to be at risk of failing and having the emotions overwhelm you. I want you to get to the point where you're pushing yourself to correct your emotions. And simultaneously doing that is controlling them, right? You're easing them back in the moment. And over time, you build the strength to be able to implicitly understand the right way of thinking about that situation. Okay. That's how you do it. All right. What's your opinion on taking continuous breaks in your trading career? I mean, when you're in a losing streak, is getting away from trading for weeks or months always the answer? No, it's not. That's an escape. You're looking to just dump all the emotion out, clear your head out, forgive, forget, move on. But then what's going to happen? You're just going to keep going through these cycles again and again. I'm not saying the answer is to just trade through it. Okay. Do not mistake my advice here. Okay. There is absolutely a use in taking breaks. Taking breaks for months, I think is, if you're taking a break for more than a month, it's because you are reevaluating the viability of trading as an enterprise that you should continue. Reassessing your motivation. I've had plenty of clients who came to trading looking to make money easily. And when they came to discover the reality, they had to take some time to really build up the motivation to want to do it the right way. And so, yeah, if you're going to take a month or two to kind of build that kind of conviction, makes sense. But if you're going to continue trading and you need a chance to kind of reset yourself, a day or a week is the most that you want, because it's not just about a pure reset. It's about rebuilding stronger than you were before, understanding why the losing streak was producing so much emotion that you needed to get away, why you were making the mistakes that you were making that you need to get away. So in that time, you shouldn't just treat it as like a vacation. You should be doing the diligent work, back testing, researching, doing other things on the technical side to clean up your strategy. And I believe that it's essential for all of you to be able to articulate, to describe your trading strategy in 30 seconds to a minute, right? Very cleanly. I'm not, obviously there's nuances and details that require more than that. I'm not, but if you're, it's kind of that classic, like 30-second elevator pitch for a business. If you can't clearly articulate how you're going to make money, now it doesn't mean you have to be able to do it to somebody that doesn't know anything about trading, right? The idea would be to other traders, who maybe trade in a similar style to you. Could you in 30 to 60 seconds describe how you make money? And if you can't, I believe that you have some significant work to do to better understand your own style. Okay. And I'm not saying that you're not making money. I'm not saying what you're doing is not viable, but to have that kind of consolidation is really important. And so in the time away, it's defining that, really understanding how you make money, right? But then also the mental, emotional stuff. So, maybe you're not doing data collection, but maybe you're working through that map. Maybe you're developing a strategy to understand the causality, the underlying emotions, and really working to be stronger when you come back. So yes, breaks are essential, but the break alone isn't the answer, right? It's what you do during the break that's the answer. How do I break the following repeated bad cycle? Discipline for 5 to 7 days with great performance. Then I put back 70 to 80% on the recent profit on a day. I get complacent with my process. So I was going to say that this is primarily caused by overconfidence just by reading the beginning, but you got the clue right here. On a day, I get complacent with my process. Now, why would you get complacent with your process? Right? That's overconfidence. That's a very, very early warning sign of overconfidence, and a very common one, right? Because effectively, you're believing that you can get away with bad process, that you're good enough. You can play with some house money here. What's going to happen today. I can kind of shortcut my pre-market prep. I've been doing so well. That means that probabilistically, I'm not saying consciously you're thinking this, but like the intent is that there's a higher probability that you're going to make money today. Maybe even 100% probability in your mind. Okay. So here's the thing. After being really well disciplined for 4 days, you need to firmly understand that you are at greater risk at that point of having a significant pullback. Because if we look at the pattern, as you said, repeated bad cycle. This has happened again and again and again. So probabilistically, that's the most likely scenario. And here you are getting complacent. You're doing the literal opposite of what you need to do in that time. You're thinking that you are more likely to make money here, when the reality is you are significantly more likely to burn 80% of your account. Now, that's the power of overconfidence, to allow you to believe that that's even, possible here. So how do you break the cycle? Like I said, after 3 or 4 days of really disciplined performance, on that 4th or 5th day, you go in with absolute urgency in your process. Maybe you even reduce the number of trades that you're taking that day. Increase the standard, right? You're only taking A+ setups. And then you do that for a couple of days and take a break. Own the win. Right? When we're building strength, right? If you keep kind of building strength, if you keep working out without taking breaks. So here's another, it's actually good. This is a good follow-up question, because here's another example where breaks can be a useful tool, right? When you're building strength in the gym, you just do that progressively day after day. Well, eventually things are going to start to break down, right? The actual muscles get stronger while you're resting. Okay. When you're in the gym, you are ripping muscle fiber. You're not getting stronger. You're actually getting weaker. But what you're doing is you're helping your body to understand what the demand that you're asking it. You're saying, I want to be able to do this easily. That's why I'm pushing so hard. The strength to do that easily comes when you rest. So, you work hard for 4 or 5 days, push yourself, give yourself a day or 2 off. Okay. And then come back and be, again, ridiculously ruthless around your process. And if it starts to feel like there's risk again, it's okay to take days off for a little while. Again, I love the way you frame the question, to break the cycle, right? To break the cycle. to do something different, but it's going to take you some iterations here to really kind of get on the other side of it and prove to yourself that you have the strength to be disciplined longer. Because as you keep going farther out, it's like the weight is just getting more and more. I mean, all of a sudden you go from lifting 100 pounds to lifting 150 to 200. It's like it's going to scale up really quick. That's why the days off are really important. And again, I think for traders, it's hard to really be diligent around those days off, because it feels like, well, if I'm not trading, I don't have the opportunity to make money. But you all know that being on the sidelines, not burning money in a situation where you're likely to, you're making a ton of money from that perspective. So yeah, good question there, Benoit. Lester, how do we get your book? Book's available anywhere you buy books, right? Softcover, hardcover, ebook, audiobook, Amazon, Audible. Yeah, wherever you get books, the book is there. So appreciate the interest. All right. How could I stop check chart always? It makes me feel the urge to overtrade, which causes breaching account. Yeah, I get your point. So how do I stop the urge to check charts when you probably don't need to be there? So I would argue that there's either like a need for that excitement, right? Like that, you want that kind of hit of dopamine, you want that adrenaline, you want that kind of spike of interest, because maybe your default mode in general is to be a bit too flat, right? Your energy is too low. We go back to that performance stress curve, right? You're kind of just too far on the left side of that curve. So you're kind of looking for the chart to just give you something to be excited about, give you something to be interested about. And if that's the case, well, then you're going to it with the wrong mentality. And I'm assuming that you've got alerts set so you don't have to check. And I would start to look for other ways to generate that intensity in your life in general, because trading is doing it in the wrong way, and that might mean getting more connected with your goals, both what you want from trading, but also what you're trying to accomplish in your life. And maybe, and I'm not making assumptions about you, but we know that this is a big problem for a lot of people right now, right? It's the phone, it's the internet, it's the constant source of stimulation, right? The society these days, the algorithms that are out there, they are weaponized against your attention. They're weaponized to capitalize on your attention. Okay? So, I'm not calling you a victim. I'm not calling any of you a victim here, right? It's our responsibility to understand what we want in our lives. And so when you get more clearly connected to, maybe the things that are not really going to go in your favor in your life, or get connected to the things that you want to be better at in your life, that kind of motivation becomes the spark. So you become more independent. You don't become dependent on the market, on the charts, to create that urgency, to create that intensity, to create that excitement, to create that dopamine. You produce it yourself, and it becomes a lot more stable and consistent that way. All right. So yeah, that urge to overtrade, once you're there, problem's already gone, right? You've come to the charts the wrong way. That's not the correction. The correction is, how well can you generate the right amount of emotion or intensity? All right. What other questions we have here? Oh, you want me to look for the questions?
Do you want me to share the questions, Jared?
Yeah, it's been very helpful. Okay, I mean, I can look through them, but I see there's a lot here, so I'm not really sure where we're at.
Or you can just continue going on with your speech or the thing that you prepared.
No. I mean, I think this. No, we should keep going with the questions.
All right. I'll have them coming up.
Yeah. Beautiful. I appreciate that. All right, Mohammed. When my trade is going negative, I wait till the stop loss, but it doesn't happen when my trade is going positive. My patient finishes, and I close the trade before the take profit. How can I fix it? Let me just read this again. When a trade is going negative, I wait till the stop loss. Okay, so you actually let it hit, but if that doesn't happen when the trade is going positive, I got you. Okay, so basically you're just closing trades prematurely. So the big kind of question here is why, right? What's happening at those points where you're solidly in profit and not what's the word? Solidly in profit, and maybe a bit like kind of attached to that unrealized P&L, and begin to think it's yours. And so then all of a sudden, now this happens very rapidly. Like our minds can move like the speed of light, right? So very rapidly, you have that attachment to the unrealized P&L, and now you got something to defend against. And when we think about fear is basically defense, right? You're trying to protect something. So you close the trade because you're trying to protect what you thought was yours. Now, a lot of traders do this because if you didn't listen to that voice in your head that said, oh, I'm in profit, I should take this, and the trade reverses and fails, now you're going to be pissed off. Not only did you lose, but you didn't listen to yourself. Oh, I knew it. I should have. If I closed this trade, I would have made money. The reality is that in that moment, you're kind of being a little bit overconfident. You're not a psychic. You do not know probabilistically in that moment what's going to happen. It's the fear talking, saying, oh, okay, I should get out to protect myself. But yet you're kind of reacting and angry as if you knew that's what was going to happen. So again, when this pattern happens again and again, now the fear is the dominant thing, and you just instinctively are protecting yourself from that anger. So that's a common pattern. But the other part is, like, as I said earlier, this attachment to the unrealized P&L. So let's just say, just to give you another example here, let's say you go into a store and they're selling T-shirts. There's no sale, right? But you decide to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to give you 50% of the retail price. Now, if that business owner, and again, let's just assume this is not in a culture or an environment where, haggling and negotiating is common. We're talking about like sticker price, retail price is what people should pay. You go in there asking for a 50% discount. If that retailer does that to you and everybody else, I mean, they're out of business. They're gone. Their business is not structured, right, to handle a profit margin that is 50% lower or more than that, because the retail price has been chopped off. My point is that you're trading, right? Your viability, your edge is based off of, having these positions be fully realized. And by protecting yourself from the short-term pain of a loss, or protecting this unrealized P&L and maybe capturing some confidence, capturing some P&L, you're reducing the long-term chances of success, the long-term chances that this enterprise is actually worth your time. Okay. So that's the point here. I mean, you got to look for the long term. In the moment, it feels right to close, but you got to remind yourself in that moment that you're killing your future, by doing that. And yes, it is hard to kind of push yourself through that, but that's where the strength can come from. All right, Lewis, what factors can cause a trader to perform well on a small account but struggle when scaling up or copy trading multiple accounts? It's the same thing that happens when you take an athlete who is really, competent in practice or in like smaller, meaningless games, and then you bring them into like a bigger game in, the regular season, and then like maybe a playoff, maybe a championship game. Like every level up, gets more demanding just because there's just more on the line, right? The bigger your account, bigger your size, the more you're trading, the more your future is on the line, the more your potential is on the line, the more your goals are on the line. So there's factually just more pressure. And as you ramp up, that pressure has the opportunity to expose underlying weaknesses. And those weaknesses, and then they come back out. So, the idea here is, are they new weaknesses, right? Or are they like kind of the same problem that you've dealt with before at lower levels, lower scale, smaller size? just kind of coming back up again. And if it's the same thing again, then you've got the corrections in play. Just apply it, right? In a harder situation. Keep hitting it, get the reps, gain more experience, acclimate yourself to this kind of higher level. That's how you get hardy there, right? When I think about, elite competition, what makes those athletes, those traders, so successful is that their C game, right? Their weak points are really strong. The stronger you are when you're weak, the better you're able to thrive under pressure. The stronger you are when you're weak, right? If that gap is really wide, right? You're really, really good when you're great, but man, you suck when you suck. I mean, you're going to really struggle when you scale up. So it's important, right? In essence, like you're minting like higher lows. That's what you need to be able to thrive at when you're scaling up. All right, Thomas, how do you differentiate between strategic ambition and greed when setting up your profit targets? That's only something that you can define, right? There's not like a hard and fast rule, but the idea is you're kind of looking for the data from a mental and emotional standpoint of kind of what indicates to you that ambition, right, that drive has become excessive. And again, I think a lot of times when there's greed, there's some expectation of profit. There's some anticipation that is just kind of greater than real. Would be kind of a common signal. But yeah, I would just start studying that inflection point. It's very, very subtle, but you absolutely can do it. The recognition is a skill, one that you can get better at with the more time that you put in. But good question. Lester, is the level of risk driving my emotion and causing all of the emotional complications? Is the level of risk driving your emotion? I tend to be more confident when there's not a lot at stake. So my worry is that you might have just kind of acclimated yourself to low risk environments. And then your confidence, your sense of competency is sort of artificially inflated. Your confidence really needs to be measured up against the standard with which you're aspiring towards, and so I don't know that it's the level of risk that's driving your emotions as much as it is maybe the self-preservation of how you feel about yourself as a trader in these like kind of lower risk environments, which can include paper trading. Paper trading is a tough thing to transition for some of you. The way to do it well, in my opinion, is to do the best that you can to treat it like every single trade you take matters, as if your life depends on it, as if your future goals depend on it, right? Because that generates enough emotional intensity that helps to make it more real and challenges your ability to execute, in conditions that are close to what the live market's going to be like. But many of you go into this sort of simulated environment, paper trading, and generate this sort of false standard of precision and execution. It's like a golfer going out to the driving range, hitting it great, and then you go out to the golf course. Like, yeah, it is more complicated. Now, I understand that, trading a simulated environment versus a live environment is a lot closer than the driving range is to golf. But the difference between playing in a tournament on the course versus like a casual round is pretty similar here. So the difference is you. That's what makes it challenging. And if you're treating yourself, if you're engaged in the enterprise in a way that's kind of too artificial, too benign, too safe, then yeah, you're acclimating yourself to the risk in the wrong way. And then your sense of confidence and command and precision and competency is not strong enough either. All right, great to hear. How to tackle overconfidence. When I try the demo account and I try to use the learned techniques, I'm quite well. But as I trade in the funded account, I don't succeed. Yeah. So actually, the answer I just gave is exactly what the issue is here, right? You're allowing the paper trading, the demo account, to give you a false impression of what you're capable of, because it's not sparking any of the emotion, right? You take a loss, it doesn't create any anger. You get a bunch of wins, it doesn't create overconfidence because, I mean, you're not making any money. You know that. Like, what happens when the money is real? That's what you need, right? And so once your goals are on the line, once your confidence on the line, once your future ideas are on the line, it's real. So, you have to really treat the demo account for what it is. It's not trading. Okay. Trading is a human endeavor. Obviously, I do understand there's algos out there, but like the way you all trading is a human endeavor, which means you can't strip away your humanity. You make it too much of a vacuum, right? Then you're really going to struggle. All right. Sometimes I take a position I shouldn't have. I attempt to roll out at break even. The opportunity presents, but I convince myself it's a sign the trade is turning around and wind up hitting stops. Okay. So it sounds like there's two things here, right? The first thing is you take a position you shouldn't have, which is maybe the bigger problem. Like, why are you jumping into these positions prematurely, or maybe not even prematurely, but just you shouldn't at all. And if you're doing that and you do know better, then you have to understand that it's not an intellectual problem at that point, right? It's either because your energy is too low or too flat, right? So from that performance stress curve, right, you're kind of in an undisciplined state. Or on the flip side, you have too much emotion. And that emotion actually prevents you from being able to access what you know is correct, right? So you do things that you know are wrong. One of the worst places to be is kind of like in that 75 to 85 range, of emotional intensity, because at that point, you still retain self-awareness, right? Self-awareness is another function of that kind of frontal higher brain function. You still retain enough awareness, but you don't retain enough control. So here you are kind of like this passive victim on a train, just doing things that you know are wrong, but can't really stop yourself. So again, that's why it's so important to get ahead of it. But for you, I think you got to figure out first and foremost, why are you taking positions that you shouldn't have? Then the convincing of yourself in the moment is a function of the fact that you're already emotionally compromised in a position you shouldn't be. Thoughts are swirling, emotions swirling. It's just a bad spot to be. Trying to correct this is too late, right? The corrections are going to come much earlier when you've understood why this situation is even happening, right? And understand how to gain control earlier, correct your emotions earlier. That's the solution here. You're just waiting until your emotions are too big. All right. From Rafikan, my edge didn't come for 2 weeks, so I didn't trade. But the third week, I got impatient and over risked. I know this is self-explanatory, but thoughts. This is perhaps a prime example of what I was expressing earlier of this sort of the issues of controlling emotion. So for 2 weeks, you didn't trade, but I'm sure you weren't happy about it, right? There was like kind of constant flashes of like, I'm missing out. I should trade. There's like emotion generating, right? Emotion building. And it just eventually bubbled over and forced you to be impatient and take on too much risk. So during those 2 weeks, you want to be able to, use that data collection or just use some just sort of straight journaling to get those thoughts, get those emotions out. So you can reduce it in the moment, right? Maybe even correct it in the moment, even though there's not actually any problems happening. Like if you understand, like, all right, FOMO's sparking out, or getting triggered, and you realize it's because you see other people making money and you're not, and that like sort of triggers a lack of confidence. But you talk yourself through it. You're like, no, like I believe in my system. I trust what I'm doing here, right? I'm going to stay and kind of hold and kind of double down on that. But if you're not doing that as an example for whatever emotions are kind of being sparked during those 2 weeks, that emotion is building and building and building, and then it just sort of snaps. So yeah, much like the other things I've discussed today, prevention is your primary weapon against a scenario like this. Nikki Z, what is it about trading that almost changes a person's personality? I'm a very logical person, and when I trade, I become very emotional. I mentioned this before. It's very, very common for this to occur. Trading is just way more intense than many people realize. Okay. And I don't know what sport you follow, but let's just say that, you were thrown into, like, you're a decent soccer football player. And all of a sudden you get called up, to play in a Premier League match. Like, I mean, if you weren't pooping in your pants, right, with the amount of pressure of that situation, like, I mean, you're not being honest, unless you're completely, delusional. So my point is, like, trading is way more intense than people realize, and as a result of that, it draws out underlying flaws, biases, wishes, illusions that we have with regards to performance, with regards to our goals, with regards to this enterprise, and including, dealing with the luck factor, and a lot of walks. I know, look, there's a lot of luck in life, but it's rarely as concentrated as it is in trading. So that alone can spark a lot more emotion. So the point is, like, these underlying flaws, maybe don't come out with as much veracity, with as much intensity in other aspects of your life as it does in trading, because it's more concentrated, because there's more on the line. And look, if you've got a job and you're getting paid by somebody else, I mean, there's a lot of security here. If you've quit your job and you're now making trading full-time enterprise and you're trying to make this as a career, like, it is factually harder. The same way it's factually harder to be the business owner, the entrepreneur, right? The person that's running the business. It's harder to do that than it is to be an employee, right? The same way it's easier to be a student with somebody kind of telling you what to do than you having to be the one who is defining your own path and trajectory. Because now you got to make decisions about what to do, and then you've also got to do it, versus somebody just telling you what to do and you just do it. So much easier, so much less risk, so much more certainty in that scenario. There's a lot of uncertainty in trading. There's a lot on the line here. So it's just an intense environment. And it doesn't mean that you're an illogical person because trading makes you do things that seemingly are illogical. It just means that you haven't quite understood the forces and factors yet that are kind of forcing your hand to do things that you know better than. All right. Happy you're enjoying it. Awesome. All right, Jared, if fear and anger stem from deeper issues like self-worth or perfectionism. Okay, so I want to first caveat this with, it does not have to. Okay, there are plenty of examples of fear and anger that do not come from issues with self-confidence or perfectionism. Okay, but let's assume that they are. How can a trader uncover the roots behind their emotional triggers, not just manage it, but truly transform it for good? I've actually written a blog on this. You can go to jaredtendler.com/perfectionism, talking about the high cost of expectations and perfectionism. The thing about perfectionism is, number one, many of you have a faulty view of it. Okay. And so as a result of that, the way in which you are measuring yourself leads you to undervalue your capacity. If you're being measured by this standard that is so high, like, that's fine if you're practical about it. Okay. And you're practical about it if you can see progress. Like, when you fall short, it's like, oh, all right, fell short, but I understand why. I'm actually doing better than I was, a month ago. So I feel not happy about underperforming, but I'm happy that I learned something, and I'm happy that I'm doing better, and I feel opportunistic that I can, take what I've learned and be better, over the next few weeks. That's a very practical way of, taking the feedback. But for perfectionists or people with very high expectations, when you underperform, I mean, it's like very, very kind of binary. It's like, you suck. You're like, damn, like, there's so much negativity that comes from that. Like, how do you learn? How do you grow when you're kind of being punished from that? And so your confidence really does take a hit, because even if you do reach the standard that you're aspiring towards, you don't get any confidence. Well, why would you get any confidence from doing what you're expected to? It just doesn't make any sense, right? You only get confidence when you exceed those expectations, but your expectations are already so high, you're not going to really reach that very often. So in order to kind of really firmly correct this perfectionism, again, there's a lot in the blog I would suggest looking at, is to reorient yourself around seeing the progress and progression, because that's a fundamental reality. You don't want to delay the feedback around your confidence until you've reached this very kind of high point. That's just like you're just asking too much of yourself. So yeah, we're gonna give yourself regular, accurate feedback. That's how you can correct this. You don't have to correct much of the underlying roots. The underlying roots are not that complicated. It's the damage that's been done from this faulty pattern, this faulty feedback for a very long time. That's what you're trying to correct here. How do you break free from occurring fear in trading when logic says you're fine, but emotions still take over? Well, the logic says you're fine, but subconsciously you're not. So I think your question is sort of assuming that the fear is irrational, the fear is illogical, but that's not the case. There is an underlying reason for you to feel this fear. Now, it might be flawed. I think your point is like, I'm misperceiving the situation, right? I see the threat of this position reversing, so I have to stay in it and take advantage of it. But the threat's not really there, right? The threat is really actually enclosing the position prematurely. So you're kind of reorienting your mind around, what the real correction is. And Jin Chu, I see your question kind of coming up a lot here. I've already answered it. So I'm just throwing it out there because I see you posting it repeatedly. I want you to know that it has been answered. If you missed it, just go back to the recording. It wasn't that long ago that I talked about it. All right. Follow up. What are your thoughts when you get into a position because all factors seem to be aligned, but upon review after, you realize that you've missed something? So you got to understand that your decision-making process is a skill in itself. Okay, equal to like my golf swing, equal to the athletic competencies that you see in football players, basketball players, whomever. So your decision-making process is a skill. If you're missing something, then you need to be training that as part of your decision-making process on a regular basis, even when you seemingly are doing it kind of naturally. In other words, like kind of overdo it. Make sure that it becomes a consistent part of your decision-making process. And you're basically just training it. It's not that complicated. It just takes the diligence to repeat it for quite some time. Do you think it's a good idea to start paper trading if you've already made your profits for the day and you want to continue trading, or would you consider closing the charts overall? Well, first off, if you can scale down significantly, I would say that's your first option. Just reduce size. If you can't, you're only trading, let's say 1 micro, then that's not really going to be an option for you. So in that scenario, I actually think it's. What are you gaining, I guess, is the point by continuing to paper trade after you've kind of hit your profit target for the day. I don't know that what you're gaining is that worthwhile, right? Okay, so you get to kind of be there, but the kind of experience that you're gaining, I mean, unless you're like kind of researching how your strategy or how your edge plays out, kind of in later parts of the day or in different market conditions, I mean, that would make sense. But I think you've got to kind of really treat it as more of like a research and development thing with a very specific task in mind, a very specific outcome that you're trying to achieve, not just like continuing to trade just to trade. I mean, otherwise that's I think an absolute waste of your time, and actually could be quite harmful, truthfully. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left here. We're going to get to as many questions left as I can. So let's kind of keep it rolling here. Maybe we'll go into a bit of a lightning round here just to make sure we get to everybody, or as many as I can. Most of the time when I win my trades, I feel a sense of pride and being the best. And this feeling makes me become arrogant. How can I neutralize this feeling instead of focusing on improving myself? So we've talked a bunch today about overconfidence, and this is an example for that in itself. I feel a sense of pride and being the best. It's the second part there that is the problem. You're not the best, and you don't need to be the best. You can feel a sense of pride for being at your best, but to say that you feel a sense of pride for being the best, I mean, you're not, first off. Second, why do you need to be? I mean, in trading, we don't even know. I mean, the traders who are the best, nobody knows. Well, let's just say that much. Okay. So you don't need to be the best. So whether it's that idea or any others that come out, right? Try to detail basically the BS, the lies that you're telling yourself, the falsehoods, the things that are untrue that you are believing. Okay. And write them down and describe why each one of those are flawed. Come up with firm corrections, right? In terms of how you need to be thinking and feeling in a very balanced, confident way. Okay. But sometimes this happens because some of you want to feel like you're the best. There's this wish, this underlying hope that one day you could be kind of in the pantheon of traders. And that's cool. I'm all for having the biggest aspirations in the world. But there's a big difference between that aspiration and kind of where you are right now. You can't know that. And obviously it's causing you to make mistakes. So, it's obviously not a helpful thought process to have, which is what you realize. What's the scariest trade you've ever taken and what did it teach you about psychology? Look, I'm not a professional trader, right? My profession is in helping traders. And as I've said, I've done that for over a decade. I do take some swing trades here and there, mostly with crypto, just because I've been around it for, since 2013. I've been getting crypto transfers since 2013, which is crazy to say. What mindset shift helped you transition from focusing on how much I can make to how well I can execute? Again, so I'm not saying this from my standpoint. The question here is, how do you become more process oriented, less P&L focused? Well, you got to find some criteria with which you can measure yourself from a process or execution standpoint. So describe what your absolute best or near close to it execution looks like. Maybe define what B game level execution looks like. So you got kind of A and B game, and then give yourself grades, right? And aspire every day to kind of get those A's in terms of your execution. And I've had some clients who, we've basically figured out that if you can screenshot your trade, right when you enter, screenshot it so you don't see the price action, so you're not influenced by kind of any movement. Screenshot the trade, look at it, examine it, give yourself a grade. Right now, obviously, there's an exit here too, and part of it. But the point is, if you can give yourself a grade in terms of your execution right then and there, hey, well, there's one. Right? You don't even know what happened in the trade. You don't even know how much you can make. You have ideas, but that's not the point. The point is, what was my execution? Give yourself a grade, and then upon exit, give yourself another grade. Or if there's any kind of trade management or any kind of scaling, obviously there can be more too. But the point is, just start giving yourself qualitative grades and being diligent and focused on trying to produce better and better execution. And that's how you can steadily shift from that. How to tell your spouse to give you space to trade. Just remind her about how much money she's costing you. I'm sure that'll go over well. How can we buy something when we don't own it? For example, gold. With money? Yeah, it's pretty much how you buy anything. How do you manage not being on the chart? All ways to avoid overtrading as a scalper and trying to be available on the charts and not to miss any good setups. I mean, if you're scalping, you got to be there. So I think the better question is, where are you going to give yourself small little breaks? Like if you're scalping on a 1 minute chart, God help me if you're scalping any any narrower than that, or at least if you're like kind of finding areas of interest on a 1 minute chart, like that means you can have like 10-15 second breaks like every 15-20 minutes. So set a timer to go off, alert you, just sit back, close your eyes, 10-15 seconds, and then come right back, right? Candle hasn't closed. Just get those little breaks here and there, right? Really can kind of keep your mind fresh and clear. Not entirely, but like you got to be there. So we're just trying to kind of avoid the over trading component, because in order for you to trade well, you got to be there, right? There's no way to shape around it. So it's more about kind of creating better condition, better management of your style, so you can kind of hang for a bit longer. All right.
right.
So
I'll
we got
pull
time
up the
for
last
one more question.
question. Yeah.
Yeah. What's that? Oh, yeah. Are we going to call it a day?
Yep. I'll pull up the last question and then we can call it a day.
All right. Sounds good. How to solve hesitation when the market comes to your entry point, even though all your rules are respected, but you still hesitate. So some of that is a byproduct of just the conviction that you have in your strategy. This is not less a mental thing and more of a technical thing. And yes, intellectually you can know what the strategy is, but it goes back to that like 30-second elevator pitch. Like, can you sell me on how you make money in 30 seconds? Go. If you can't, the hesitation might just be a byproduct of what I would describe as the weakness in your comprehension, your connection that you have to your strategy. Now, it might be because there's some inherent fear there, but you got to look at that secondarily. The first thing you got to make sure is, do you have enough conviction and real strength and integrity in your strategy? Like, you think about the difference between, being able to drive a car after having driven it for 3 months versus having driven it for 3 years or 5 years or 15 years. Right, the level of competence you get from being having that much more experience, it's significant. So clearly, there's not going to be any hesitation here. So, yeah, both things are options for you. But the bottom line is you got to have more strength and conviction around your strategy. And then, if the hesitation doesn't go away entirely, then you can look at what fear might be present. All right, we're going to call it a day here today. Lots of great questions. Really appreciate the enthusiasm you all brought. Saw lots of the good words in the chat. Appreciate that. Happy you guys were getting a lot of value out of it. And we're going to be back in 2 weeks, same time on Thursday. What is it? The 3rd of July. So I hope you all join me then. Come back. Listen. So those of you I give advice to, I'd love to hear any feedback or updates on what you've done, or if you found some challenges.
All right. We'll end the stream. Thank you so much, Jared.
All right, you got to be well. Take care, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.